This information on your list here, this information comes from 2 Kings, the last two chapters, 24 and 25. The very last chapter of 2 Chronicles, 36. Jeremiah is in Jerusalem still, even though people have been exiled to Babylon. It takes 20 years for everybody to be taken out of Jerusalem and exiled to Babylon. So you have Daniel in exile in Babylon, while Jeremiah is still in Jerusalem preaching to the people that are still in Jerusalem. It takes 20 years for the exiles to complete. So that's a good understanding, because then you wonder, well, what's Jeremiah? How is Jeremiah still in Jerusalem if everybody's been exiled? So Chronicles 36, Jeremiah 21, 22, and 32. And then Daniel also gives us dates. Chapter 1, chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 10. We get dates. So that's what I'm going to share with you, is the kings and the dates. And just to make it easy, guys, let me start with Josiah. Josiah is a great place in history to start because he was a good king. Do you guys remember when I talked about Josiah? He's the one that finds the book of the law and dusts it off and teaches it to all of Jerusalem. And there's this massive, rejuvenation. He brings back the feasts and the festivals. If you remember, they celebrated the festivals. There was dancing and laughter and happiness and music. And they were so excited and in such a good place that they extended the celebrations an extra week to keep on celebrating. So this time with Josiah was a massive high, a great time when God had favor on Israel. So it's a good place to start with Josiah, but let's understand what God was thinking. Even though Josiah was a good, obedient king, let me take you guys to some verses. We're in 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 25. And we'll work our way through Kings as I talk about Josiah's evil sons. That's the period of time where Daniel is written. So 2 Kings 23 and 25, Josiah had been a great king, and here's the comment. Before him there was no king like him who turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses. Nor did any like him arise after him. But still the Lord did not turn from the burning of his great wrath, by which his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations which Manasseh had provoked him. The Lord said, I will remove Judah out of my sight, as I have already removed Israel. Assyria has already come in and taken Israel out about 100 years earlier. I will cast off the city that I have chosen, Jerusalem, and the house of which I said, my name shall be there. So we remember in Joshua talks about God kept all of his promises. He gave us all this land. He gave us peace. He gave us happiness. And now here at the end of the Chronicles of Israel, God says, enough is enough. I am going to do away with Jerusalem, the place where I said my presence would be there. So after Josiah gets killed in some Egyptian wars. Did I give you the name? Josiah is killed by the Egyptian wars called the Battle of Megiddo in 609. So I'm just going to basically round up for ease. Josiah brings to an end what we call the 7th century. And then what we're going to have now is a big account of the 6th century, which is Josiah's, what I'm going to call it, Josiah's evil sons. Okay, these are the rest of the kings in Jerusalem. About roughly 605, this happens. So you've got a couple of the sons that are only kings for like 2 or 3 months. So I'm only going to highlight 3 of them: Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. And if we get a general idea of these guys are the kings in Jerusalem while Daniel is writing the book of Daniel. Okay, Daniel is the first one to get exiled way up here early on. So he'll be in Babylon while these guys are all still in Jerusalem. So the time of Josiah's evil sons, the first one is Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim Our understanding of Jehoiakim comes from 2 Kings 24 and 25, 2 Chronicles 36, Jeremiah 22 and 23. He is king while Egypt is in power. The Egyptian Pharaoh comes in and takes Jerusalem and gives him a new name. His name was Eliakim to start with. The Egyptian Pharaoh renames him Jehoiakim, and then Jehoiakim is a vassal for Egypt. Then comes the Battle of Carchemish in 605. It's the Battle of Carchemish where Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon overtake Egypt. And as they overtake Egypt, they now overtake Jerusalem. Jehoiakim now becomes a vassal for Babylon. We'll pick up in 2 Kings 24 and verse 1. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. The Lord sent against him the bands of Chaldeans, bands of Syrians, bands of Moabites, Ammonites, sent them against Judah to destroy it. You know, that is something to keep in mind as we hear how Jerusalem was destroyed. Keeping in mind the whole time, the Lord is the one doing the destroying. That's a pretty powerful message here. The Lord sent them to destroy Judah according to the word that he had spoken by his servants, the prophets. Surely this came upon Judah at the command of the Lord. So he's making a point of making sure they understand that, to remove them out of his sights for the sins of Manasseh according to all he had done. Wikipedia on Jehoiakim says the following. After the Egyptians were defeated by the Babylonians at the Battle of Carchemish in 605, Nebuchadnezzar II is the Nebuchadnezzar we know of Babylon. He named himself after an old Nebuchadnezzar that was way back in history. He was Nebuchadnezzar first. So Nebuchadnezzar II is the guy we know. He besieged Jerusalem. Jehoiakim changed alliances to avoid the destruction of Jerusalem, and he paid tribute from the treasury in Jerusalem, some temple artifacts, and he handed over some of the royal family and some of the nobility as hostages. So Jehoiakim now has to pay a price to Babylon in order to not be destroyed. So there's a few years there where the king of Jerusalem gets to stay there. Jerusalem stays intact as long as they don't make the Babylonian king angry. This is exactly where the story of Daniel begins. We can look at Daniel chapter 1 and verse 1. We'll pick up right here. Jehoiakim, one of the first evil sons of Josiah, is over there in Jerusalem being the king. And as long as he's nice, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't do anything. And this is exactly where our story starts. Now notice, the book of Daniel is going to start right here. And it's going to be continuing, even though Jerusalem is going to have several kings that stay in Jerusalem after Daniel. That's going to be insightful and exciting as we go through Daniel to realize. So first, Daniel chapter 1 and verse 1. He's going to date it for us. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and he besieged it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vassals of the house of God. He brought them to the land of Shinar. Shinar is Babylon, Chaldea, Ur of the Chaldees, the place where the Tower of Babel was. We're going to go into all those names. But Shinar is that same area. So we'll get into that when we actually exposit Daniel. The houses of God and the treasuries and the vessels. The king commanded so-and-so, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel from the royal family, the nobility. Now pay attention to who he wants to take first. This is the first exile out of Jerusalem. There's going to be 3 or 4 total. Who does he take first? This is very insightful. The royal family, the people of nobility, youths without blemish, the ones with good appearance, skillful with all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent, to stand in the king's palace so that he could teach them literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned for them a daily portion of food, so he's taking care of them. They were educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Amongst these were Daniel, who's going to give us the book. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, these guys are all given new names. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Jehoiakim, Wikipedia says about Jehoiakim, the king we just read about. He reigned for 11 years total until 598 BC, when Babylon came in and took over because he rebelled, and his son Jeconiah, which is also called Jehoiachin, takes over after Jehoiakim makes Babylon angry. Babylon comes and takes him to Babylon, along with our guy Daniel. And then we'll be left with Jehoiakim coming up next. Just a side note, guys. Notice Nebuchadnezzar, a wise leader, and I pointed out, who does he take first out of Israel? The nobles, the royals, the skillful, the competent, the ones that can learn quickly, because he wants to take, I'm just going to call these guys the one percenters. Does that make sense?
Not only that, the youth, if you get the minds of the youth. It said the young ones too.
Yeah, not just any young ones, though. The ones that learn quickly, the ones that were handsome, the gifted ones.
People would want to follow once they became.
There you go. The reason I bring that up is because there's always, in every age, there's always an attempt to get the young people angry at somebody. And we see it happening today, is everybody wants to get angry at the rich guy. Everybody wants to get angry at the man. Everybody wants to get angry at the guys who own the businesses. And they think that the people that work in the businesses should be equal to the guy that owns the business. We're seeing that today. That's the whole, the democratic thing, is that socialism. Let's get everybody equal. It's important to draw out that as God is destroying Jerusalem, notice that he takes the one percenters out of Jerusalem first, because what happens when you remove the one percenters out of a culture? You got nobody that can govern people. You got nobody that can start businesses. You got nobody that knows how to finance loans to employ people. So you take the one percenters and you are going to collapse the country. I just bring that out on the side because I think it's a sin for what the Democrat socialist idea is, for several reasons. One of them, one of the commandments, I don't remember if it was the 10th or the 8th, the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thy neighbor's house, thy neighbor's possessions. And that's exactly what they're saying to the poorer people. Get angry at those rich people. They owe you. We take what they have and give it to the poor. That's what we want to do. God called that a sin. He said, do not covet what that person has, and you do not have. The second covenant that they want to break is commandment number 8, thou shalt not steal. So the Robin Hood movies, stealing from the poor, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, is a very unbiblical idea. You're not allowed to steal. Now, does God expect the rich to be kind? And he expects it, but it's got to be a willful thing, not a thievery, not a theft. It's just my little 2 cents on that whole idea. So he takes the one percenters out of society first, and that's going to make Jerusalem collapse. Okay, incidentally, I feel like I had the good fortune. Mom has a fantastic story to tell. In 1968, my father was working for a petroleum company in Peru, and there was an uprising. One of the poor guys in the army somehow rose to power, and he overturned the government. 1968. Velasquez, you guys should read about it. Velasquez, what's the guy's name? Velasco. Juan Velasco Alvarado overthrows the Peruvian government 1968. And so there's a personal experience with that. He hated the rich, and he believed that you should steal from the rich and give it to all the poor people, the ones that are out in the fields sweating and working hard. So that's exactly what he did. While my dad was in Peru in 1968, they came at gunpoint. The army came at gunpoint, shut down the wealthy oil companies, and my father happened to be working there. So at gunpoint, he was taken out of the job, told to get out of Peru. He has to go down to Piura, where my mom was living at the time, hides out in their house for 1 month until they got married, and then that very night at 4 a.m, they leave town and they fly back to Mexico. So this guy Velasquez overturns the Peruvian government. He's a poor guy. What does he do? He strips all the properties, all the houses, all the finances, and all the land away from all the rich people, and he gives it to the poor people. Well, guess what? Poor people don't know how to get a loan to finance all the seed that you need to plant 100 acres. They can't get the materials that you need. They don't know how to operate the trucks or the tractors. The whole economy of Peru collapses because the poor people don't know how to run a country.
Just like Zimbabwe did when they took it all away from the farmers and gave everybody 5 acres and nobody could do it.
Nobody knew what to do with it. There you go. So, a little pointing. Okay, so that is Jehoiakim. When he gets run out and gets made a captive down in Babylon, this is when Daniel is taken as well, and Daniel is going to start getting his visions that he records in the book of Daniel while he's down in Babylon. We'll move down. Jehoiachin he's Jehoiakim's son. He becomes the next king in Jerusalem. He's put in place by Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, the rule is, as long as you keep me happy, you get to be king. He only lasts 3 months. Yeah, he only lasts 3 months. His name is also Jeconiah and Coniah in the rest of Scripture, and I'll bring those out. He only rules for 3 months. Wikipedia said about Jehoiachin, on March the 15th in 597 BC. I don't know how they get it so exact. Jeconiah, his name is Jehoiachin, his entire household, 3,000 Jews, were all exiled to Babylon. So this is about a year after Jehoiakim is exiled. They're all exiled. The king Nebuchadnezzar rose up to conquer Egypt. So let me give you a scripture that also says this, 2 Kings 24 and verse 7. 2 Kings 24 and 7. The king of Egypt did not come again out of his land, for the king of Babylon had taken all that belonged to the king of Egypt, from the brook of Egypt all the way to the river Euphrates. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king. He reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was, in verse 9, he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord according to what his father had done. And at that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. So this is now the second time that Nebuchadnezzar has come up to Jerusalem and besieged it. If we continue reading here, verse 10, at that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up to Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to the city while his servants were besieging it, and Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, gave himself up to the king of Babylon. Himself, his mother, his servants, his officials, and his palace officials. The king of Babylon took him prisoner in the 8th year of his reign, carried off all the treasures of the house of the Lord. Going down to verse 14, he carried away all Jerusalem and all the officials and all the mighty men of valor, 10,000 captives, all the craftsmen and the smiths. None remained except for the poorest people of the land, and he carried away Jehoiachin to Babylon. And then we've got this reference here, March 15th, 597. Jehoiachin and his entire household, along with 3,000 Jews, were exiled to Babylon. That's in Wikipedia. What I thought was so exciting about this study, guys, is everything that history records. 2 Kings is giving us the same story. And so that just fascinated me that we've got this, what do we call it, corroboration? Corroboration. I like seeing that. So he's taken away. Now, here's something interesting to learn about Bible language, guys. He says he carried away all of Jerusalem, all the officials, all the mighty men, so on and so forth. You would think that that's the end of Jerusalem. But as you can see, we still have another king. I think Zedekiah was king in Jerusalem for like 11 years. So there's still more kings. There's going to be 2 more exiles, 2 more deportations. So it's something interesting about biblical language. To a critical mind, you're going, well, if he took everything out of Jerusalem here, how come there's still 12 more years of history in Jerusalem? So we should just kind of get our scopes adjusted to that. we must not be able to be critical with the text because it's obvious it doesn't mean what it sounds like it means, if that makes sense. I don't know what to do with that, but as you can see, we still have 11 more years to go. The end of 2 Kings, here's something interesting. So he's carried away. We have the second deportation in Jerusalem. Zedekiah is made king in his place. There might have been one guy in between here. Zedekiah is now made king. Before we go to Zedekiah, when 2 Kings is done with the history, it goes back and it tells us something interesting about Jehoiachin. And I want to cover that with you guys. So let me see where it's at here. The end of 2 Kings, chapter 25 and verse 27. 2 Kings 25 and 27. Let's see if you can put together some of the dates here. Verse 27. In the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiachin, so he's going back in the story because he's already told us about Zedekiah. In the 37th year of exile of Jehoiachin. Okay, so here, Jehoiachin gets exiled. How long has it been? Isn't that interesting? 37 years later. Okay? There's been some more kings in Jerusalem since then, but here's what's interesting. 37th year of the exile of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month on the 27th day, Evil-Merodach. Evil-Merodach was one of the sons of Nebuchadnezzar. So he's the next Babylonian guy. King of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, graciously freed Jehoiachin, king of Judah, from prison. Very interesting. He spoke kindly to him, gave him a seat above the seat of the kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiachin put off his prison garments. Every day of his life, he dined regularly at the king's table. And for his allowance, a regular allowance was given to him by the king according to his daily needs for as long as he lived. What I think is interesting about that is you got this new son of a king whose first name is Evil, and you have Jehoiachin, who was a very evil king. And I think this new son just must have got along. What do you call two birds of a feather?
Birds of a feather flock together.
Two birds of a feather. He took this guy out of jail because he was just as evil as him. And so from now on, two evil guys get to hang out at the king's table for the rest of his life. Now, that to me is a bit fascinating, but I have something at no extra charge for you guys. Although for your gift, your free, non-compulsory gift, Jehoiachin, you notice in the text in Kings here, it says, and he had a regular allowance that was given to him. I want to share something with you guys. And I'll give you a copy, but for anybody that's listening to this, you can go to Wikipedia and look up Jehoiachin's. Where's my eraser? Oh, here we go. Okay. Here's your Wikipedia search. Keep in mind, Jehoiachin is the guy that's hanging out with Evil-Merodach. In Wikipedia, you want to look up Jehoiachin's rations table. Oh, tablets. Guess what?
It's in the history book somewhere. What is?
They have literally excavated Babylon and found the tablets
So they paid him.
where Marduk recorded how much to give Jehoiachin in his allowance. Wow. They found the tablets where it is recorded, Babylonian tablets. You look at the second page. The second page has got a nice big picture for you guys.
They found this where they dug up Babylon. On the back, it says what it says.
Yeah, you probably can't see this, but they literally found the stone where evil Murdoch recorded what to give Jehoiachin as his allowance. Isn't that awesome as far as...
Oh, it's not in English.
No, it's... the language would have been Akkadian. The language that you see there is Akkadian. So there you go. Jehoiachin's rations tablets. There is a great apologetics for the validity of Scripture. So fascinated by that. In 1899 to 1917, Robert Caldewey was excavating Babylon, and he discovered that tablet. Jehoiachin plays a very prominent role as a mile marker, so to speak, for Israel in the Old Testament, because a lot of people refer back to the time period of Jehoiachin, and I want to give you a couple of them. Esther, chapter 2 and verse 6, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who were carried away with Jeconiah. Jeconiah is Jehoiachin, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, carried away. So Esther mentions that time period. Jeremiah mentions the time period and curses Jehoiachin. As long as I live, declares the Lord, although Coniah, that's what he's called in the book of Jeremiah, he's called Coniah. That is also Jehoiachin. You got to remember those three names for Jehoiachin. The son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet on my right hand, yet I would still tear you off, give you to the hand of those who seek your life, the hand of those whom you are afraid of, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. I will hurl you and your mother who bore you into another country where you were not born, and there you will die. On and on and on. So Jeremiah calls these curses down on Jehoiachin. Ezekiel, chapter 1 and verse 2. Sorry, that was Jeremiah, chapter 22, verse 24. Ezekiel refers to him, chapter 1 and verse 2, the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity. So this guy, he's like a milepost in Old Testament history. Not to mention evil Marduk must have really liked him for some reason. Okay, so that brings us to Zedekiah. Zedekiah, there might have been another king in here. Zedekiah is going to be the last king of contained in the Old Testament. That's the final. So I like starting with Josiah. Josiah is killed about the end of the 7th century. These evil sons of Josiah, or sons of sons, is the beginning of the 6th century. And you guys can remember, right? 6th century is all the 500s. 599 all the way to 500, right? BC. That's the time period. So we're in the 500s, and these guys encompass that period of time. Zedekiah is going to bring on the third wave of deportations. His name is also Mattaniah. I think I gave you that in your notes. Mattaniah. So you have to follow. The scriptures tell us that he was exiled in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar. Basically, it looks like the scriptures refer to the years of Nebuchadnezzar as the first time we see him come on the scene. The first time we see Nebuchadnezzar come on the scene is in Daniel chapter 1. So that's considered the first year of Nebuchadnezzar. We're now getting through the text in the 18th year. So it takes at least 20 years. 20 years for the exiles, the deportations, to happen. Okay? Jeremiah is going to be a prophet in Jerusalem during that time, and Daniel will be the prophet down in Babylon during that time.
They should have got one of the big planes you saw and just picked them up and taken them.
Here's what Wikipedia said about Zedekiah. In the 9th year of Zedekiah's rule, all the way until the 11th year of Zedekiah's rule, a Babylonian army laid siege to Jerusalem as he conspired to revolt against the Babylons with Egypt's help. So Zedekiah was going to ally with Egypt to try to war against Babylon. You may remember this story because Jeremiah counsels Zedekiah and says, God said, don't go to war with Babylon. Don't do it. You're better off to give in to Babylon. Zedekiah doesn't like that, and he chooses to do it his own way. We'll see what happens. So during the siege, the prophet Jeremiah urged a patient submission to the dominion of Babylon, which he regarded as the will of God. But royal officials, so Zedekiah is so grateful for the information, royal officials and Jewish notables denounced him and accused him of desertion and put Jeremiah in prison. That's how grateful they were for the information. Recorded in 2 Kings 24, 2 Chronicles 36. I'm going to read to you 2 Kings 25 and verse 1. 2 Kings 25 and verse 1. In the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th day, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came with all his army against Jerusalem and laid siege to it. And they built siege works all around it, so the city was besieged until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. That puts us about 587. 587 BC, the 11th year of Zedekiah. So, 2 Kings 25 and verse 6. They captured the king, brought him to the king of Babylon, and they passed a sentence on him. They slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah right before his eyes, and then they put out Zedekiah's eyes. Bound him in chains, took him to Babylon. The 5th month of the 7th day of the month, that is the 19th year of the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar. So it took about 20 years. King Babylon, the captain of the bodyguard, sent the servant of the king of Babylon, and he went to Jerusalem. And there he burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every single house, he burned it down. All the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls around Jerusalem. So it's that last deportation. Now, historically, there is still another exile from Jerusalem, even after all this has been done. So every time it sounds like they've totally massacred Jerusalem, there's still another exile to come. It's interesting language.
Or they vacate Jerusalem and people outskirts move out.
Maybe.
The other thing too, they don't always say it, but even in some of it says, and they leave some there to take care of the animals and the...
Yep. But here they burn everything down. They break down all the walls. You would think that that's pretty much destroyed. And there's still one more exile after this. This is from Babylonian Captivity, Wikipedia. Babylonian Captivity is the key word. A later deportation occurred in Nebuchadnezzar's 23rd year. So actually, I said it took 20 years. Apparently, it's up to 23 years of deportations. The dates, the numbers of deportations, and the number of deportees given in the biblical accounts, they vary. The deportations are dated from 597 for the first, another one at 587, another one at 582, and possibly one after that. In summary, the Babylonian exiles take place over a period of approximately 20 years. We could even say 23 years, apparently. Before the burning of Jerusalem, the destroying of the temple, the burning of the houses, and the breaking down of the walls in the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar. While all this is going on, as we approach the study of the book of Daniel, we'll want to remember that Daniel was caught up in the very earliest, the very first of all of this. So as Daniel is in Babylon, as we go through the book of Daniel, if I remember correctly, and I'm going to try to help identify the chapters for you guys, but the book of Daniel, I believe, spans about 70 years. And so it's really nice to know, where are we in the deportations? In chapter 4. where are we in these deportations when we get to chapter 8? You know, those are the kinds of things that knowing these things, who's the king, what's happening, that kind of stuff, as we go through Daniel, I think will make it much more interesting.